Hi there! Welcome to Story Circle! My name is Celeste, and I'm so happy to have you here on my channel. Here, I get to read your stories. So if you have a story that you want read, feel free to check in the description on how to submit your story. I'd love to read it. To kick off this channel, we're going to start with a series of modern-day folk tale. This first story we're going to read is about why does the sun rise and set the way it does? Philadelphia-based author Guy A. Sims answers this question with his series of short stories from RIFE Powers and Other Too Tall Tales. Thanks, Guy, for your story. So, sit down. Do I have a story for you? Today, we're going to read RIFE Powers and the Setting Sun from RIFE Powers and Other Too Tall Tales by Guy A. Sims. The best place to begin any story is at the beginning. So let's begin. In a place called the Land, there was a whole bunch of folks living and working like most normal folk would. All week long, they would do what they did best, and come the end of the week, they would put their feet up, have a large feast, perhaps have a boot stomp, or just go a-visiting. The people were pretty happy with their lives and didn't think too much about it. Until one day. Now, everybody knew that the rooster crowed when the sun came up in the morning. You stopped to eat lunch when the sun was overhead, and headed home for supper when the sun started to creep into the crevices of the Grand Mountains. It was like that for as long as anyone cared to remember, and it seemed that it would be like that until most folk were gone and forgotten. One day, all of that stopped. It all started when the rooster didn't crow in the morning. Most folk didn't notice because without the usual cock-a-doodle-doo, they just stayed fast asleep. In fact, the sun didn't come up until lunchtime and then finished out the day as normal. Most folks scratched their heads and didn't think twice about it since sleeping late was a treat. The next day, the sun did the same thing. It didn't rise until lunchtime and went down maybe an hour or two before supper. On the third day, it rose extra early and set right after lunch. The folk began to worry that the sun had gone plumb crazy. Not only was this affecting their eating and sleeping, but the crops also became confused and stopped sprouting. The chickens became puzzled and stopped laying eggs. And even the baffled cows stopped giving milk. The folks were stymied by the problem of the sun. No one knew when to go to work, when to eat their meals, or what time to show up for the weekly boot stomp. They were in a terrible fix. After several months of this, they decided to call upon the one man who could solve this problem. The town's mayor went deep into the forest, crossed a bubbling creek, and reached a clearing where there was a small shack. Out in front was a pile of freshly cut lumber. The mayor could hear a whackety-whack of chopping going on out back behind the shack. Slowly, he walked around and saw a man chopping trees into lumber. That wasn't unusual for people back then, except this man was chopping the trees with his bare hands. The mayor held his breath, just watching him. Fell one tree after another. After stacking 3 piles of 6 feet high logs, the mayor spoke. "Are ye RIFE Powers?" "Have been since me ma first called me that." Rife extended his hand to greet the mayor. His handshake was firm, but friendly to the mayor's surprise. "If ye be RIFE Powers, then ye be the man I've been told to get." Rife asked the mayor if he wanted something to drink, since his shack was a long ways off from town. For a man who was somewhat taller than the average man, somewhat heavier, somewhat more handsome, and plenty stronger, the mayor found him to be somewhat politer. as they sipped on spring water with a little orange squirted in for flavor. The mayor explained the problem they were having with the sun. "You know," began Rife as he swallowed down the last drops of his drink, "I thought something mighty peculiar was going on. Why, the carrots I planted months ago haven't even begun to bud." "That's right. Why, we can't even get our crops to grow or animals to give. The folks are in a terrible mess and just might starve if nothing is done about this here sun. The folks want to know if you can do something. If you can fix this problem, I can promise you the people in the village will build you a new shack and make you a new set of clothes and a new outfit for each day of the week." The mayor laid down his offer. Now, Rife was a man of little means. He was quite happy in his small shack and one suit of clothing. "Look, you just go back to your folk and let me see what I can do. It may take a while, but don't start doubting me. I won't come to see you until it's done." Rife finished talking with a smile and pointed the mayor in the right direction to go back to town. Since he wasn't quite sure what to do, he went inside his shack and started his lunch. Just then, the sun went down. It was around supper time the next day when the sun came up. Rife figured the only way to solve the problem was to go to the source. He packed himself a small lunch and a jug of mashed oranges, and he headed into the Grand Mountains. Once at the top of the highest peak, he waited for the sun to start to go down. On this day, the sun began to go down right after breakfast. As it began to slip behind a tall mountain peak, Rife called out, "Hey there, sun! Whoa, for a minute. I'd like to talk to you." The sun crept down a little further, but then stopped. It was more than rare for anyone to ever ask the sun to stop and talk. "What you want to talk about?" boomed the sun in a loud and hot voice. "It seems that nowadays you have been keeping your own time." The sun nodded in agreement. "You know, you're right. For as long as I recall, I have been coming up early in the morning, hanging around the lunchtime, and then slipping down into the great mountains around supper. One day I got to thinking, I am the most powerful thing in this world, and I should start doing things the way I want to do." Rife just stood there. He reached into his sack and began to snack on his lunch. "You heard what I just said?" questioned the sun. "I am the most powerful thing in and around this here world." Rife just kept chewing. Watching Rife chew annoyed the sun tremendously. Its face grew brighter and brighter as it shouted, "If there be anyone more powerful than me, let him challenge me. If I am beaten, then I will do as he pleases." Rife covered his eyes, for even it was a bit too bright for him. He raised his jug to drink. After a swig or two, he said, "Look, Mr. Sun, I would like to challenge you to an arm wrestling contest. We'll meet up at the top of the world in 6 months. If I win, you go back to rising before breakfast, hanging high at lunch, and retiring at supper. Agreed?" The sun snickered and slipped away behind the great mountains. With only 6 months to the contest, Rife figured he had better start getting ready. The mayor and his people gave Rife as grand a farewell as they could, considering they were kind of weak from not getting enough sleep. They packed him a large satchel of food and drink. The mayor even allowed Rife to use one of his strongest and fastest horses. Rife told them to be patient. He would straighten this whole matter out. The townfolk wished him well, and Rife started north to the top of the world. It took Rife quite a while to reach the top of the world. He had to cross a couple of raging rivers, cut his way through some thick forest, and climb a couple of mountains before eventually ended up in a deep snow. When finally he reached the top of the world, he smacked the horse on its rear and said, "Get on home, horse. I won't need you no more." He watched the horse head back towards the town. Soon he began looking for the largest block of snow and ice in the area. He found the right one and jammed his arm into it. With his other arm, he would feed himself with food and drink the people gave him. Rife stayed right there with his arm in the ice for 6 months. It was while Rife was chewing on a frozen piece of jerky that he saw the first ray of the sun dancing on the horizon. He found a rock and bust his arm free from the ice. The sun sat down right next to Rife and said, "So, are you ready?" "Let's get started," Rife smiled. "I'm plenty homesick." The sun made an arm out of one of its rays, just big enough for Rife to grab. Even with his frozen arm, Rife could feel the heat from the sun starting to defrost his hand. Rife allowed the sun the honor of counting down, and on 3, the contest began. They struggled against each other's strength for about a week. At one point, the sun almost had Rife's hand touching the ground. Rife knew that his arm was defrosting, so he threw all of his natural strength into his shoulders and almost broke the sun's ray. Rife had won. "I'll do as we agreed," said the sun as it took off to start a new day. "But I will never stop to talk to another man as long as I live." The townfolk knew of Rife's victory long before he returned. They celebrated tremendously and wanted to make him a king. Rife just wanted to return to his small shack and continue chopping wood. Before he left, he told the people that if they ever had any more trouble, he'd be happy to help them. That evening, as Rife finished chopping down a dozen trees, he watched the sun creep down into the crevices of the Grand Mountains, reminding him that it was supper time. The end. Could you imagine what it would be like to arm wrestle the sun? Thanks, Guy, for that awesome story. Well, that's all that I have for today. Join us next time as we continue reading more of your stories on the Story Circle. See you next time.